Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGaming.com video, we're going to be discussing AMD's recent comments regarding Vega, specifically what they hope the performance will be in the marketplace, the release date, and a few other bits and pieces. And then we're going to be focusing all our attentions on Nvidia and GP104 in the GTX 1060. And no, I didn't misspeak. It's a bit of a weird one. We'll get to it in just a moment. So recently, Dr. Lisa Su, who is of course AMD's CEO, was discussing various aspects of AMD's strategy and planning at the 20th Annual Technology, Media and Telecom Conference, which took place on November 30th, 2016, so just yesterday basically. Now, we all know that Vega has been, well, in the pipeline for some time, and Lisa Su has said, and I quote, this, by the way, is these transcripts are thanks to seekingalpha.com. I've linked them in the video description. And as we go forward, 2017 will really roll out of our high performance roadmap. A few years ago, we decided that CPU performance was absolutely critical and that we needed to start from scratch. And so Zen is our high-end performance CPU that's a really significant enhancement over what we've had in the past. That's unscheduled. We're launching that in the first half of 2017, first in the desktop market, and then into the high-performance server market. But then we also have our Vega architecture and graphics that's coming out for high-performance graphics in the first half of 2017, and that is very busy time for us in the next number of quarters. And then she adds that they have indeed made very good progress on the sales of their GPUs, and not just on the customer side, but also on professional graphics market. Now, it is worth noting that some rather major companies are starting to utilize AMD for GPU technology, for example, for professional computing. And she said, and I quote, when you look at graphics, it's really both in the customer side on the channel as well as OEM, and then on the professional graphics market, and there's large opportunities. And I think we've gained a good amount of share over the past few quarters, and we're going to continue to consistently drive. We believe there is no reason we can't get a 50-50 share, but that will take some time, which is fine. I completely agree with that. Now, there are some other rumors and reports going about with the RX 490, or if you prefer, I guess you could call it the R9 490 or the 490 Pro. It's had a lot of different names, to be honest, and no one's really sure what it is eventually going to be called. However, a website has actually popped up on a price guide, which is Price Guide, P-R-I-S guide.no, and basically it is using placeholder images of a Radeon graphics card. It looks like an RX 480 to me, which is fine. It is, as I said, a placeholder image. There is no date regarding the release. They're just saying it's the second half of 2016, which is, well, probably very unlikely to happen at this point unless we get a rabbit out of the hat. And obviously, in terms of technology, it doesn't support things like SLI and PhysX, which isn't surprising considering it's an AMD card, so obviously not so much going to support SLI. It does, of course, support Crossfire. There have also been a couple of supposed leaks regarding the performance of the card, which puts it between the GTX 1070 and the 1080. The problem I'm having is that the websites which are citing it all cite Chinese sources. Now, I've gone through the requisite normal sources of leaks, for example, ChipHell and a few others, and basically trawled, and it's quite interesting because most of those websites are citing the websites which are saying that they got the leaks from, so I'm not really sure what's going on there, and so I'm super skeptical about the performance data that we're seeing. I'm not saying it's inaccurate, I'm not saying that it's made up, but I am very skeptical of it to the point where I'm not even going to show the image, to be honest. But one thing is for sure, AMD are going to be working on a new graphics card in early next year, and honestly, it's the reason I'm primarily discussing this card is because we know it is happening. We know AMD are planning on it. They've shown the 490 several times over on their website. It popped up on Sapphire. I mean, we've discussed this a couple of times on the channel previously. So there is something definitely going on there. But there are an awful lot of questions, as regular viewers will know. Like, is it going to be Polaris based? Probably not, unless it's dual based. But that really doesn't make sense to me at this point. It would make very little sense, at least in my mind, to release a dual Polaris when we're so close to Vega launching. Now, if I had to be a betting man, or at least a skeptical person, I would probably say that AMD were planning on a dual part, but then they decided against it because Vega is so close. Let's assume that this card really hits the retail shelves in, let's say, January, February for dual part. It's very hard to argue that that's a good buy when Vega would be coming out just a few months later. Now, I have heard some people speculate that it could be a Fury, but even then, a rebadged Fury, I guess it's possible. But obviously the issue with Furies is that they've only got HBM1, unless it's completely reworked, and then it would be an older architecture. I just don't really know. I'm very skeptical of it. Personally, I think the 490 is most likely going to just have to wait until Vega, and I think that makes a lot more sense. Then again, I have been wrong before, and I'll probably be wrong in the future, because that's just the name of it at the end of the day. We don't have enough information, and I'm pretty sure that if I spoke to AMD, they're probably not going to tell me the answer. So, yeah. Anywho, there is one thing, however, that is really interesting that's popped up over the past few days, and this one is a credit to videocards.com. That is with a Z, just for your FYI. So, typically, and you might be aware of this, the GP104 is generally found in the GTX 1080, the 1070, or the 1070 mobile, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know there. However, there is a report going around that there is going to be a version of the GTX 1060, and no, it's not a 1060 Ti, that would basically feature a cut-down GP104 core. Now, presumably, this is going to be a card which basically does not meet the muster of the higher-end GPUs, and basically they want to trim the cards which essentially don't work, and we can presume a good number of the CUDA cores which do work by, well, BIOS. Now, the reason that's really interesting is because the traditional the GTX 1060, I can't speak suddenly, has 1152 working CUDA cores. Well, at least in the GTX 1060 3GB. And it's possible, therefore, that we could get more more CUDA cores enabled with this particular model. If you are lucky, you could perhaps enable them via a BIOS hack. So, for example, the standard 3GB GTX 1060 comes with 1152. If this cut down version is simply locked down via BIOS, it's possible that users will find a way to edit the BIOS, flash it, or maybe unlock it via a driver, a hacked driver, and then get additional CUDA cores and therefore performance for free. But as I mentioned, the issue is this is China exclusive. So it's kind of cool that Nvidia are doing this, but the bottom line is it looks like it's only 3GB model, which is a bit of a shame, and you're still only running on a 192-bit memory bus, which also is going to put a bit of a scupper on things. Now, personally, I would love to have seen a GTX 1060 Ti, which basically bridges the gap between the 1060 and the 1070, because let's face it, the two cards are, well, kind of far apart from one another. And that's a bit of an issue right now. I do think in the market, for lack of a better word, there's a gulf between the GTX 1060 and the 1070, as well as the RX 480 and the 1070, to be honest. You've basically got that massive divide where there's a clear step up. And one can argue that, yes, you've got it with the GTX 1070 and 1080, but I think it's actually more noticeable with the 1060 to 1070, at least in my opinion. So I think a 1060 Ti would be absolutely amazing, but obviously it's not going to happen. My feeling is that a lot of the manufacturers right now, including, as I mentioned, AMD, probably are just waiting, to be honest, until the next set of cards and the updates. As we all know, there's supposedly going to be a tweaked version of Pascal coming out at least at some point next year, before obviously they work on Volta. So I guess it's kind of to tide them over while Vega isn't hacking. It's I guess they're building their Great Wall of China to basically beat back AMD, and AMD of course are going to be launching volleys known as Vega, which is probably going to be Vega 11 and Vega 10. And there are a lot of mixed reports, as we all know, about Vega and how different it is from Polaris. We were originally told that, well, okay, told is a bit of a strong word, but it was originally thought that Vega, it was going to follow on pretty soon after the initial Polaris lineup, and the differences were not going to be that profound. But then we found out that no, it's going to launch quite a bit later, but it's going to, we thought at the time, very similar architecture, and then we found out no, there was going to be some significant differences in the architecture between the two cards. So right now we're in this really weird position with both manufacturers. Anyway, I don't necessarily know this video answered a lot of questions. It certainly raised some questions, and there are a lot of cards at the moment that are going missing. Like, we all heard about the rumours about the GTX 1080 Ti that I covered a couple of weeks ago, but there doesn't seem to be anything else. And I do wonder if it's because that, once again, these companies know that they're so close to perhaps their refreshes, they just maybe are holding fire. I don't know. It's quite interesting. But let's hope for some extra technology, because it gets kind of dull when there's no releases. Personally, I'm looking really forward to Zen, and judging from the reaction of you all over the last couple of Zen videos that I put out, especially yesterday when we were going through all of the information that I knew, or I know about, and we know about commonly about Zen, and specifically Summit Ridge, which of course is the desktop Zen, there is a lot of excitement about it because we know it's going to shake up the CPU market. Anyway, I'm going to let you all go. I think that's enough of me waffling on this particular video. Normal stuff, like, share, subscribe, comment, do all the normal bits. Especially because at the moment there seems to be a bit of a YouTube bug that's going around. So if you don't like and comment, or at least interact with the video in some way or another, supposedly it can get you weirdness with the interaction level of the channel, and sometimes you can unsub, which is just weird. So, you know, do leave a like if you don't normally bother, because frankly sometimes it's quite easy to forget. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.